Hello, once again, listeners and viewers, to Rising Above Shadows of Abuse, or Raza. I'm your host, Grace Upper. Sky News, dated 16th of May 2025, by Becky Johnson, social affairs correspondent, and Rebecca Spencer, special producer. A female veteran of the Royal Military Police tells Sky News she experienced sexual harassment and assault and heard rape allegations against male colleagues. That's the claim of a whistleblower who served as a sergeant in the RMP for over a decade and says she was one of the man's victims. Amy, not her real name, says a toxic culture in the military police means sexual predators in the army are getting away with stuff that they shouldn't be getting away with. It's a rare insight into life inside the Royal Military Police, the corps charged with investigating crime in the army. Amy described how the man who assaulted her would go into women's rooms and sit on their beds. She says he used to force her to go out driving with him at night and talk about sex. He preyed on the young, new females that were in the unit, she says. One day I was out with my friends in town and he was on patrol. There were two of us that went over to speak to him and I had quite a low-cut top on. So he hooked his finger around my top and pulled my boobs out. She recalls as she tried to stop him, he grabbed my hand and put it on his privates. She claims there are other men in the RMP who've been accused of sexual offenses, recalling hearing of 5 separate allegations of rape against male colleagues by female colleagues. If all of this sexual assault and bullying and rapes are going on within the military police, how can they then go out and investigate the wider army for doing the same things? She says it doesn't work. Looking back on her career in the army is difficult for Amy. After leaving, she tried to settle back into life as a civilian with a new job and a young family to look after, but says she worried about bumping into former colleagues in the street. It's taken me a long time to heal, she says. I was very bitter towards my military career when I left, but I've had to sort of learn, build myself up again and remember the good times because they were really good times as well. I think it was just so bad at points. When she joined the RMP, she believed she would be part of a unit representing how the rest of the soldiers should be conducting themselves. The reality, she says, was that she had become part of one of the most toxic corps in the army. She recalls being told that the staff sergeant she had reported for sexual assault will be allowed to resign. They basically told me he's not going to be charged, but will be leaving the military, doing him a favor, she says. He got away with it all, she adds. He's not going to lose his pension and whatever else he would have lost with a dishonorable discharge. He left without a criminal record. That's not safe for civilians as well, because it's not even on his record. Earlier this year, an inquest into the suicide of 19-year-old Royal Artillery gunner Jeslie Beck found she had been failed by the army after reporting sexual assault and harassment. Since then, Sky News has reported claims of widespread abuse and growing calls for investigation into sexual offenses to be removed from the RMP and instead carried out by civilian police. The Labour chair of the influential House of Commons Defence Committee is now urging the government to act. Sandeshis told Sky News the system needs to change. Incidents of sexual violence and sexual assault should be dealt with not by Royal Military Police but by civilian police and civilian courts. I hope that the government will be making that substantial change in the very, very near future. In fact, they should do it ASAP. In 2022, the Defense Serious Crime Command Unit was established to provide greater law enforcement across the armed forces. Following the inquest into Gunner Beck's death, the Ministry of Defense announced a new specialist trial service team to take the most serious complaints, such as bullying, discrimination, and harassment, outside the single service chain of command. The change will see bullying, harassment, discrimination-related service complaints dealt with by a team outside the commands of the Royal Navy, British Army, and Royal Air Force. However, Amy believes investigations need to be done completely separately from the military. Otherwise, it doesn't work because friends will be investigating friends, she says. I think there is such a male-dominated space in the military still. Women have no chance, and it's not fair because people are getting away with stuff that they shouldn't be getting away with and allowed to continue doing it and ruining lives. She believes the entire system lacks accountability. They investigate themselves, she says, even down to how the RMP is regulated. The people that run that unit are RMP. They get posted in, do a few years, and then get posted back out. Katie, also not her real name, served in the army for over 20 years. She saw active service in Afghanistan and rose to the rank of captain. It was a distinguished career that was brought to a premature end by sexual abuse and whistleblowing. Having taken the difficult decision to leave the army, she now leads a secluded life and suffers poor mental health. I still struggle, she says. I'm still very wary of men. My relationship is strained. Everything seems like black and white. Everything seems like black and white now. Like I live my life in black and white rather than full color. As a person, it has changed my life forever. To begin with, she was in the same unit that Gunnar Beck would join years later. She too experienced harassment and abuse and says her line manager laughed when she reported it. I just felt like dehumanized. I felt like property. I didn't feel like a person anymore, she says. And so I would avoid people. I would hide in the garages, behind the tanks, in between the guns, just praying that these people hadn't seen me and I might be able to escape them for that day. She moved to a different unit, but says wherever she went, abuse was rife. After being groped by a higher ranking colleague, she assumed her chain of command would escalate her report to the RMP. Instead, she says she was put in front of the sergeant major and told off. I remember at the time saying I like to call the civilian police, and I was told that I wasn't allowed to do that, and I'll be disciplined if I tried to do that, she said. So I was so frightened. She stayed in the army hoping to make a difference. As an officer, she began reporting abusers on behalf of younger victims. I kept this goal in my head of reaching a position one day where I could help other women, she said. When I got there, I realized it was way more toxic than I could have imagined. The officers' corps were actually the worst perpetrators of all because they brushed it under the carpet. There was a will and a need more to protect themselves or their friends, or the reputation of the unit first and foremost. She believes change made by the MOD since the death of Gunnar Beck to remove the chain of command from sexual abuse investigations will make little difference, saying they will be carried out by the same people but just under a new title. An MOD spokesperson told Sky News that unacceptable and criminal behavior has absolutely no place in our armed forces. They added, that is why this government is creating a new tri-service complaints team to take the most serious complaints out of the chain of single service command for the first time, and has launched a new central task force on violence against women and girls to give this issue the attention it deserves. We are also establishing an independent armed forces commissioner with the power to visit defense sites unannounced and to investigate and report to Parliament any welfare matters affecting service life. Amy believes the RMP is not fit for purpose. They have higher standards to uphold, yet they don't uphold them within their own regiment, within their own lives, and then they expect to police and uphold those standards throughout the rest of the army, she says. At the end of the day, they know the law and they should be held accountable for what they do. What do you think, listeners and viewers? Please leave your comments as relates to this newsreel via our email address, risingaboveshadowsofabuse@gmail.com. On this note, we've come to the end of today's episode on Rising Above Shadows of Abuse. Rasa. Hope to see you on our next episode. Take care, be safe, and be positive. Bye for now.